Okay, last time we discussed why having an organization is important. We discussed the four walls of the business. We discussed putting the roof on first. What we want to do this time is discuss the structure and go into detail as to the structure and what the importance of the structure is. So for the next few times, we're going to discuss different types of structures and how to do that. What we do is we always teach, and as you've heard before, that we always teach you to own nothing but control everything. And I asked the same question last time. How do you do that? How do you own nothing and control everything? Well, the idea is use your structure. Take a look at your business structure. What's the best way to do things? Because that's going to make a difference in everything that you do. And we're going to discuss today C corporations and S corporations. Over the next few times, we're going to discuss limited liability companies. We'll touch a little bit on general partners and limited partnerships and sole proprietorships. We'll also discuss trusts. Those are really important. All of those are critical because what you want to do is to not just have one type of business. You want to have different types to be able to take advantage of the different tax benefits of each organization. Every organization is taxed differently. You as an individual is actually an organization and you're taxed differently. There's some tax advantage you can take and some tax advantages you can't. The same with every other organization. So today we're going to discuss the different types of organizations. The first type of discussions we're going to do today are what we call C corporations and S corporations. Everybody has heard of S corporations. I don't think many people have really heard of a C corporation. Most of them don't even know what C stands for. The C in a C corporation stands for classic. It's been around forever. In fact, the basic premise of corporate law came over with us when we formed our own nation from where Britain was. That's the starting of the C corporation. In 1959, the federal government put together an S corporation, which stands for small business. And small business corporations were organized to overcome problems, and we'll discuss those in just a second. What is the difference between a C corporation and an S corporation? The reason that the S corporation was formed was to avoid what we call double taxation. Double taxation doesn't mean that the corporate gets taxed and the employee gets taxed, which is true, but actually if you have an employee in a corporation, that employee's expenses, that employee's wages are an expense, a tax deduction to the corporation, reducing its taxable income. An S corporation, though, was formed to eliminate the idea of passing part of the profits from a corporation to the shareholders. Shareholders invest in the corporation. They're not part of the management. They are only owners of the company. They own a certain percentage of the company based on how many shares that they have. And those shares are not worth anything unless they make money or if the company grows. And the idea for the investor to get his money back is to be paid a dividend. Dividends are taxed, and so is the profit. So if the company makes $100,000 profit and shares that with the shareholders, that's the idea behind investing in a company. The money that the corporation makes as a profit, the entire $100,000 is taxable, and the $50,000 is not a deduction to the corporation. So if they want to split the $50,000 off and send it over to the shareholders as a dividend, corporation pays on $100,000 and the shareholders pay on their $50,000. So that $50,000 was taxed twice. It's called double taxation. So in 1959, the federal government decided to implement the Small Business Corporation, which becomes a pass-through. Pass-through meaning that the profits of the organization are not paid by the company, they're paid by the owners, by the shareholders. In the next couple of slides, we'll discuss, in the next couple of videos, we'll discuss the pitfalls of owning an S corporation, because I am dead set against having S corporations. They're really not a good tax way to go. However, What we want you to do is to today understand what it takes to be an S corporation and what it takes to be a C corporation. And both corporations have to be organized exactly the same. S corporations and C corporations are organized as a corporation. S corporation is only a tax designation. C corporations are organized first, they're filed with the state, they're governed by some state law, but mostly by federal corporate law, because most states have exactly the same laws. And then the C corporation has to have certain individuals or companies involved. The first is shareholders. They're the owners. And the shareholders don't manage the company. The shareholders' one responsibility is to elect the board of directors and the chairman of the board. Once the election is done, they're out of any reason to do things. Now they're going to a shareholders meeting, and they have to have a shareholders meeting once a year. They have to have minutes. They have to keep minutes of those shareholders meetings. And during that meeting, the president or other officers of the company will tout the benefits of being part of that corporation, will tell you how much money you've made, and kind of big a big deal. The main reason for shareholders is to elect the board of directors, including the chairman of the board. Once that meeting is over with, then the board of directors has to have a meeting. We recommend that there be 3 members of the board of directors, the chairman and 2 other members. Shareholders do not designate officers. Boards of directors designate the officers and appoint the officers. Each board member has 1 vote per board member. The chairman has no more votes than any of the other board members. 1 vote. So when they get into a board meeting, the board of directors sets the policies, they set the procedures, they set the goals, they decide which way the company is going to go. And if somebody on that board doesn't like that direction, they can vote against it. That's one of the reasons that we suggest you have a 3-member board of directors, so that there is not a tie vote. You only have 2 members of the board of directors, you could be in real trouble because you've got an impasse. You can't go anywhere. After the board of directors meets and goes over things, that they develop the bylaws are the Bible of the company. They then elect or appoint the officers. We recommend only 2 officers initially. The 2 officers would be president and secretary. And the reason for that is it's normally those 2 officers that are required to sign legal documents, one of which is the certificate that must be issued to all shareholders. All C corporations, all S corporations must be organized and operate the same. Businesses have to remain separate from the owners. That's important. You cannot be considered an alter ego. An alter ego is one person acting as though he is every part of that company the same. That means that there really is no business or corporate structure. Then, if you want to be taxed as a pass-through, passing the profits to the members or the shareholders, then you have to apply for that designation with the IRS. It's using Form 2553. You go in and make an application to be an S corporation, which is only a tax status. C corporations pay their own tax. Right now, this year's tax is 21% for a C corporation. S corporations do not pay tax. The shareholders pay the tax, so that the profits or the losses, if there are any, are passed on to the shareholders. But they have to have regular meetings, just like a regular C corporation. They have to have their shareholders meetings. They have to have the board of directors meetings. The president and secretary have to do things. It has to operate as a business. There are some other benefits, though, that C corporations have that S corporations do not have. And we can go into those at a later time. But what we want to do is to make it simple. Keep it simple. Keep the operation simple. Keep everything working right. But act like a business. Don't be an alter ego. Now, to form a C corporation, you must have 3 different types of documents to begin with. Well, actually 4. Nope, 5. Take it back. The first one you have to have is articles of incorporation. Those are registered with the state where they want to have the corporation be domiciled. It's called a domestic profit corporation. We won't talk about nonprofits at this point. A domestic profit corporation registers articles of incorporation based on what that state requires in those articles. Every corporation must have a registered agent, which is the spokesperson. And then that corporation must file with the IRS to be issued an employer identification number, EIN. That EIN is the tax number for the corporation, because a C corporation makes its own tax return, prepares its own tax return, and pays its own tax. A C corporation, S corporation have to do exactly the same before the S corporation tax designation. Once the S corporation or the C corporation is recorded with the state and issued an EIN, it can then file to be an S corporation with the state that it's in. And you can file those corporations in any state, and most closely held corporations, which is what we express that you want to do, which are those that have less than 100 shareholders, are recorded in every state and usually are recorded in the state where the owners live. But you don't have to be. You can have C corporations owned by people outside the country even. You can't do that with an S corporation, but you can with a C corporation. It can be owned by those outside the company or outside the United States. And it can be owned not just by individuals, but it can be owned by trusts and businesses and corporations and LLCs and individuals. But it has to have individuals that are officers and board members. Once that's all organized and ready to go, if they decide they don't want to be taxed as a C corporation, they then apply with the IRS using Form 2553 to be a sub-S or small business corporation, taxed as a small business corporation, which eliminates the self-employment tax, and it also eliminates the dividend. It eliminates the double taxation problem. With the article of incorporation, once it's filed, you have to have bylaws. Bylaws tell about what every officer does, what the bylaw, what the corporation is going to be doing, basically, how it's going to be run. It's the Bible. Everybody has to approve that. Those have to be approved by the board of directors. Then you have to hold the initial minutes of shareholders, elect the board of directors, and keep minutes of that. After the initial board of directors or the shareholders meeting, you then have the initial meeting of board of directors, where they approve the bylaws, discuss the banking procedures, discuss where the company is going to go, and everything that's decided on has to be done by corporate resolution. And then they elect the officers. The president and the secretary do what they're asked to do, and we recommend that normally a president would be the CEO. We recommend that the chairman of the board be the CEO, the chief executive officer, and the president be the chief operating officer, and the secretary take care of the minutes and make sure that everything's taken care of as far as the records go. Once those documents are in place, the next thing to do is to issue shares of stock, and it has to be issued. There has to be a certificate sent. Has to be signed by the president and the secretary. And the information concerning those who hold the shares of stock have to be kept in a record. We have to have names, addresses, social security numbers of all of those that are issued shares of stock. And that is mostly the responsibility of the secretary of the company. So there's how you organize a C corporation and an S corporation. Remember, S corporations have to be organized and operate exactly like a C corporation. The only difference between the two is the tax designation and who pays the tax.